talk about his bill about regulating microchips and being implanted in employees. And there's a bunch of stuff that's going on. Fascinating article. A lot of good quotes. A lot of interesting quotes thanks to Michael Wickline and his piece, No Tax Increase Pledge Hits State Highway Bump. This is talking about, of course, the Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist. Michael Wickline pointing out that a lot of these Republicans have taken a tax pledge to not increase taxes. And so the question is whether or not referring a measure to the people as to whether or not they need to increase their gas tax, is that, in fact, a vote for a tax increase? Some say yes, others say no, and the ones that say no are really the most interesting to me because has anyone ever heard of the phrase mental gymnastics? We'll talk about this here in 5 seconds.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 1. Thanks so much for being with us. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are building a liberty machine here. We want you to be a part of that machine and the construction of it. You can call or text us 870-275-9799. Let us know what you think about the show, the issues of the day. Our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly, meaning what the legislatures and the legislators are doing in your name in Little Rock. They're reconvening today. And we're going to start to really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of things. One of the main topics of debate when it comes to why we send our legislators down there is how are they going to take money from us? Are they going to change the way they do that in the form of tax increases, tax decreases, tax shifting? Is it going to be revenue neutral? Is it less money going to the government, more money coming from the people to fund the government? What's it all going to end up like? These are the questions that everyone wants to know. And eventually we'll know, right? Eventually they're going to be done. Eventually it's going to be over. There's going to be an analysis of whether or not there's more money going to the government than there were before. These 135 people met down in Little Rock. But in the meantime, all we can do is kind of speculate and listen to what the politicians are saying. So Michael Wickline has this headline this morning, No Tax Increase Pledge Hits State Highway Bump. And it's a photo here at least on the website, a photo of the Lieutenant Governor, Tim Griffin, on the front page here. Wickline reminded everybody that 23 state lawmakers who have pledged with a Washington, D.C.-based group, Americans for Tax Reform, to vote against any tax increases, disagree whether a vote to refer the tax for highways to voters would run afoul of the pledge. So they're saying that there's different interpretations, meaning some people think that if they were to vote for a plan that referred to the voters whether or not they wanted to increase the taxes on themselves, as to whether or not it's a tax increase. Some say, yeah, it is. Some say it absolutely is a violation of my pledge if I were to do that. And some say, no, not at all, it's not. Now, what do you think? What do you think? I want to read some of their quotes here. Let's get to some of their quotes, and then let's kind of talk about whether or not it is or isn't a tax increase. I'd love to know your opinion on this, by the way. Feel free to sound off on the Facebook comments. We're broadcasting facebook.com/Conduit News or over in the YouTube channel, Conduit News. Or you could text us, 870-275-9799. So the group, again, is Americans for Tax Reform. This is Grover Norquist's group. It's a very, very old group. I mean, considering, it's 30 years old, 30 plus years old. 1985 is when Americans for Tax Reform was formed. And so here's the deal: the legislature in Arkansas is very powerful when it's in session. You got to have broad consensus to raise the taxes on the people. And Michael Wickline writing here that Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson and legislative leaders said they are weighing their options. Legislative leaders said it would be tough to get lawmakers to raise taxes for highways without referring it to voters. Now, keep in mind, this is interesting because we talked to the majority leader in the House, Marcus Richmond, 2 weeks ago, and he said on the program that, or maybe it was 1 week ago, he said, hey, we don't need to refer it to the voters. If we're going to vote for a tax increase, we should man up and just vote for a tax increase. Now, that's a very interesting position. It's one I can respect. Don't misunderstand me. I would not be happy if Republican legislators voted for a direct tax increase on the people. I would not be happy. But I would be I would respect the ones that did, especially if they were, to come and make their case about why we have to do it. And if they were to say, this is what I believe, and instead, if you refer it to the people, well, then you are inviting confusion, and it's a way to potentially deceive. It'd be one thing if you refer it out to the people, and then the legislator that says I'm going to refer it out to the people says because I support a tax increase. That'd be one thing, but that's not what they're going to do. Any blowback they get from people like you or me saying you voted for a tax increase, they're going to say, I did not. You're a liar. You're a liar. Again, let's get to their comments. Okay. Matthew Shepard, quote, again, from Michael Wickline's piece in the Gazette. Clearly, any kind of tax increase would be very, 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 very difficult. Those are 4 verys. House Speaker Matthew Shepard says, but I do think after 8 years of being here, there is a stronger desire now among members to do something on highways, and there is more discussion than there has been at any point except maybe in 2011 when we referred a half-cent sales tax for highways to voters in 2012. I would never rule anything out, but clearly that would be a challenging position. Now, that we could really unpack that. If I could spend a little bit of time on that, but after 8 years being down here, he says people are more likely to do something about highways. Now I'm paraphrasing here, or I am, I guess, speculating. Could that also mean after 8 years being down here, meaning 8 years being away from the people, we're more likely to pass a tax increase than we would have been if we'd have just been elected and just come off of our campaign promises? It's just a question. Just a question. He didn't say that. He said to do something about highways. What he probably means there, he could also mean people have been down here for 8 years and they have seen the budget. They're more familiar with things. They know that, that the highway department is struggling or anything else. Now, it looks really bad. The highway department just gave $1 million to the University of Arkansas to build a college building, and then they're coming at us telling us they want funds. I will tell you this. There's no reason why we shouldn't be using general revenue. A portion of general revenue, not a lot, but a portion of general revenue should go to fund highways. The highway department, if you actually get them, they'll actually tell you that's what they think should happen, but there is resistance in the leadership. The governor does not want to use any money from general revenue to go to fund highways, not even a little bit. And so that's really frustrating, I think, to a lot of people. They are looking at getting more money from us. I mean, say what you want. Their ideas, I want creative solutions, creative solutions to find more money. I know you do too. Most of us do. I don't want them to, let's get creative on how we can tax the people in a different way. I don't want that. But, I'm not down there being browbeaten by bureaucracies every day, being told that we've got to have more of the people's money. So they want to raise the state's gas tax on diesel and regular gasoline. And if they do that, again, that's 75 votes in the House you got to have, 27 in the Senate. That's a lot, okay? That's a whole lot. That's your 3/4 majority that you're going to have. But if it says here, but adding a sales tax to fuel would only require a majority vote in both chambers. Okay. So Senator Bart Hester is quoted here, and he says this about whether or not referring a vote to the people to raise taxes is in fact a violation, or is it not in fact a violation of the Grover Norquist tax pledge that you're not going to raise any taxes. Bart Hester says, quote, I personally feel like I would violate my commitment to the voters of my district if I vote to advance a tax to the people. It doesn't take someone very long at all to figure out the highway budget is massive, and they are not as efficient and as responsible with tax dollars that they currently have, end quote. Senator Bart Hester. So he says it would be a violation if I were to vote for a plan to refer to the people. That would be just like I'm voting for a tax increase. Do you agree with him? But then you have State Representative Lane Jean, a Republican from Magnolia. He doesn't see it that way at all. Quote, I don't see it as violating that pledge. If overall what we do with income tax lowers the overall tax burden, I could do that vote as a tax increase for highways. End quote. Senator Jason Rapert saying this, quote, giving the people something to vote on, to my knowledge, is not actually voting for an increase. You are simply referring out an issue for the people to take a look at and see if they choose it or not. Voting for access to voters to make a decision on an issue is a completely different matter, he says, than voting and saying, I am voting for a tax increase. Also is a matter of net as well. In terms of my participation in the legislature, I am way into the black, so to speak, on issues that I voted for, that is cut taxes for the people of Arkansas. So if it were a tax increase, you're saying you've done a lot more good than bad. If we agree that tax increases are generally bad. Public House Transportation Committee Chairman Mike Holcomb, Republican Pine Bluff, quote, I am going to put it this way. I am not against doing a referral to the people and them make a decision on highways. The governor wants to do the referral, and I think that is what's going to happen. All right? Mike Holcomb, that's what he says. The governor wants to do this. This is what's going to happen. So 23 lawmakers have signed this. Well, let me just say this. Wickline writes, the governor was asked by this newspaper whether the 23 lawmakers who signed the anti-tax increase pledge factor into his thinking whether the legislature should raise highway taxes on its own or refer the matter to the voters. Quote, any pledges that legislators sign are always a factor, but I'm confident there is legislative support for a highway plan. He goes on, I have always thought a referral to the voters for the highway plan that involves new revenues is the best option. That's more taxes. Now think about that. You want, and it's a way for legislators to kind of throw their hands up and say, well, it wasn't me, it was the voters. Quote, but if there is a consensus on other means to fund highways that does not jeopardize education and other essential services of the state, then I will obviously be open to those discussions. For those concerned about a no tax pledge, everyone can be assured that there will be tax reductions in the session of the legislature. Okay, well, what does that exactly mean? I mean, you can say you're going to increase taxes here and lower them over here. So technically, that's very carefully crafted language. Technically, that's true. What I want is a guarantee, will we be paying more money to the government or less money to the government? And I don't see if you refer this tax to the people, I don't see how you can say that we're paying. You know how much money that is? It's millions and millions and millions of dollars more going to the government. I don't remember what the estimate was, but it's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be a huge tax increase. Let's get some more quotes, shall we? Let's see here. Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin only has a vote in the Senate if there is a tie vote, but he has a bully pulpit as the second highest elected official in state government, according to Michael Wickline here. Quote, the governor and the legislature are exploring a number of options, and they are committed to funding our roads, Griffin said. Highways should always be a top priority and deserve a long-term strategy that provides robust and reliable funding. Stop. Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin here raises a great point. Do we have a long-term strategy to fund roads right now? Absolutely not. There's absolutely No capacity from leadership to consider the general revenue fund, taking revenue out of there. Not to mention, we passed a half-cent sales tax back in 2012. That was supposed to solve things, but guess what? They're back here, and they don't want to let it sunset. That's one of the key components of Governor Asa Hutchinson's plan, is to have another vote to continue the tax increase from 2012. That, by the way, all the people voted on under the understanding that it would sunset. So I want everyone to understand where we are here, just from my perspective. We're in the very beginning of the second term of basically the same leadership that we've had for 4 years, certainly in the legislature and obviously in the governor's office. And we always have to come back and address highways. We had to call a special session, what was it, 2 years ago, to address highways. But there is no long-term solution. There is just, we're just kind of going from, you could say it, I guess you could say crisis to crisis in a way. You know, we don't have a long-term solution here. Anyway, back to Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin's point here. Highways should always be a top priority, deserve a long-term strategy that provides robust and reliable funding without raising taxes by using savings from government transformation. And, he says, like 34 other states, dedicating a portion of state general revenue to fund them. He said, I believe we need to address challenges like this with reform first, not tax increases. Wow, that's a really good statement. Norquist from the Americans for Tax Reform, president, said the goal is to not increase net taxes. Quote, the commitment is to the voters and to the people of Arkansas. The argument over compliance with the pledge is going to be whether the people of Arkansas, not me. There you go. That's very interesting. Okay. Let's keep going here. Do we have any more quotes? Was there something in here about strategy? Seems like I read something, because this is a little different than the. I think the online version's kind of been updated from the print version I was reading earlier. Back to Wickline's piece here. Hutchinson and key lawmakers said they have been trying to figure out how to change the proposal to guarantee that no filer will be hit with a tax increase. It's talking about overall tax reform. They expect to release a revision this week. Hutchinson also said that he wants lawmakers to enact legislation patterned after South Dakota law that upheld the United States Supreme Court to allow the collection of sales taxes from out-of-state sellers without a physical presence in the state. In other words, internet sales tax. He also wants the state to adopt certain provisions of federal income tax law. Okay, so here's the deal with this. That means, I mean, that's as clear that's as clear as it can be, that the governor here is going to want, with his income tax cuts proposals, he also, he's got to have that internet sales tax with it. One would assume, or one might think, that you put them both together, and you put people in kind of like a very you could put people in a bad situation. There is the possibility to put people in a really bad situation. What I mean by that is, you could craft a piece of legislation similar to the 2 years ago. There was the military tax cuts, the veterans, right? If you were a military retiree, they wanted to lower your taxes, but they wanted to raise taxes over here. And so in order to vote for and they had people that had already committed to vote for the military tax cut before they read the bill. Well, in the bill, they were raising taxes on candy and soda. They created a new digital downloads tax that the state, and so you had people between a rock and a hard place, and it was a terrible thing for Republican leadership to do to other Republicans. Well, you could easily see that strategy here. Hey, vote for these income tax cuts, and if you don't, we're going to say you didn't vote for income tax cuts, but you also have to vote for an internet sales tax that's attached. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities here. Let's see. Asked if he intends to include those two options in his income tax cut bill, Hutchinson said the exact timing and structures of the legislation is a matter of policy and strategy, and there are ongoing discussions as to the best approach. Strategy. I expect more news on this point sometime this week, the governor said. I fully expect that the tax bills will result in a net tax reduction so that any group who measures tax votes will be supportive. Any group. Okay. A net tax reduction. Let's do it. Hey, I'm ready. I'm ready. Like, I am ready for it. Who's ready for a net tax reduction? That's great. That's fantastic. We've got, signal here that at least we're accepting the definition of what a net tax reduction is, or what a tax decrease is. Let's see where we get with this. We got to take a break, though. I've gone way over this opening segment, so don't go anywhere. We're going to be back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there was a motion to dismiss a lawsuit by Preferred Family Health Care. And this is big news here. Now, I mentioned Ecclesia College and everything like that at the beginning of the show when I was previewing this interview with Mr. Joey McCutcheon and Matt Bishop. Hey, guys, are you guys on the line? Can you hear me?
Yeah, Paul, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to the program. And so if you guys can recap where we are with all of this, specifically start with the new developments about this lawsuit with Preferred Family Health Care.
All right, Paul, we'll do that, and I'll let Matt jump in here anytime. But in essence, what Preferred Family has said is that
in Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so backing up to the original question of this first half hour, do you think referring a vote to the people to raise taxes on gas is a vote for a tax increase? Do you think that it is? I personally do. Let me say this. If you vote for something, what are you doing? You are showing your support for something. If you vote for this referral to the people, then you are supporting the potential outcome of a tax increase. You are. I mean, it'd be like, and I've done this analogy before. Somebody comes up to you and say, hey, sir, we'd like for you to sign this petition to get so-and-so issue on the ballot, recreational marijuana on the ballot. And I'm like, no, thank you. And they go, come on, man, it's just to get it on the ballot to let the people have the say. And then it's like, well, let me get this straight. I don't support that. I don't want that outcome. So why not I don't sign the petition and guarantee I get what I want out of the situation? You see what I'm saying? So for you to vote, well, it's just a vote to let the people have a say. Well, then you are supporting the tax increase. And to say that you're not just fuels the skepticism and cynicism of the people versus the politicians. You know what I'm saying? So just be honest about it. I mean, don't refer this to the people. If you want to pass a tax increase, pass a tax increase. Come on, you won't be the first people to do it. Now, the voters are going to be mad at you, and that's just the thing. Well, let's refer it out to the people then. Well, go and look how many of these ballot initiatives, unfortunately, people don't read them, and they just go through and they just check yes on everything. They really do. Now, this one might be a little different because it is, hopefully the language would be clear and that it actually is a tax increase. But then we have people, at the very end of this article about the internet sales tax, Senator Bart Hester said the consensus in the 27-member Republican Senate is to include the internet sales tax bill into the governor's income tax legislation, quote, for Main Street fairness. Once again, I do have to point out that an internet sales tax doesn't help Main Street businesses at all because they don't get that money. The government does. Somebody explain that one to me.
We have not alleged any wrongdoing on the part of the state, and I think that it's very clear that we have alleged wrongdoing on the part of the state, whether it's with former Senator John Woods or former Michael Woods or Eddie Wayne Cooper. Matt, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, Paul, and I think what it comes down to is I don't believe we have to. But there are some cases in Arkansas that seem to go both ways, and it's something that the Arkansas Supreme Court's got to decide. If you bribe a legislator, do you still have to allege that the law that distributed the money was wrongdoing and was wrong, illegal? And to me, that's I can't see the Supreme Court coming down and saying it's okay to do that as long as the law was all right. And if you look at the purpose behind this constitutional provision, this was designed for the citizens to act. We don't have to wait on the state. And in this case, you wouldn't want to because it's the state legislators that are being bribed. So I don't think that the motion to dismiss will stand, but obviously I'm not the judge, and the judge makes that call, and it will go from there.
So let's talk let's talk about the reason. Jim Parsons, you guys are representing him. He's a Benton County resident, and this is an illegal exaction, right? You guys think this whole preferred family health care situation was an illegal exaction. What specifically are you referring to?
Go ahead, Bill. Oh, yeah, sure. Illegal exactions is a constitutional provision in the Constitution of 1874. And it basically says, and there's two types. There's an illegal law, and Paul, you and I once talked about the solid waste district case, where I'm saying the way that law is applied is illegal in taxing the citizens. There's also what's called public funds cases. Basically, when the person obtains the funds and the money is being misapplied or illegally spent, or the money is used improperly. So this is one of those cases where we're saying you didn't allocate tax funds to pay fraudulent medical claims, to bribe legislators, to buy World Series tickets, to pay for lake houses in Carroll County and beach houses in Florida. That's not what our money should go for. Wow.
Yeah, no, I think the average person, I mean, on its face, we know it's wrong. It's just, well, you know, are there going to be consequences from this? You know, Joey, what's your feeling on this? I mean, preferred family health care, the state, you know, has eliminated the contract with him at this point. It took them a while to do it. It took them much longer than I think they should have waited because we were hearing about all of this corruption with preferred family health care. And some people think that the feds...
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown ninefold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong Province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So, Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Li to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Li. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas,
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Li and I met yesterday. Chairman Li indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. That was just a little bit of Vice President Mike Pence's speech at the Hudson Institute last year about the dangers of China. And, you know, of course, we have a montage. We're comparing that with the potential deals that Arkansas is trying to get with these communist Chinese countries, and we're pointing out that we don't think it's a good idea. Folks, there's a lot of stuff in the news. A lot of stuff that's been going on, whether it started really with Nancy Pelosi disinviting Trump to the State of the Union. Then you had President Trump grounding her plane. Then you had, out of the blue, this BuzzFeed story that was totally bogus, that Robert Mueller then, just spanked down the media. I've never seen anything like it. And then the media, they were so embarrassed that they decided to make and try to ruin the lives of some high school kids from Kentucky. That's the way I see these stories over the last couple of days. Joining us now to talk about this and much, much more, we have Mr. Dan Perkins is back with us. He's a master storyteller, the author of the Brotherhood of the Red Nile trilogy, and you have seen him talk nationally about radical Islam. He's a contributor to the Daily Caller, Clash Daily, LifeSet, Newsmax.com, and TheHill.com. Dan Perkins, welcome back, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. It's always great to have you. Yeah, so that was kind of my summary of what's happened in the last couple of days. It's been a jam-packed news cycle the last few days. I feel like a lot of stuff is happening in the midst of a government shutdown. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I think that the news media did not comport itself very well last Friday and Saturday, and it's. I would like to think that they're going to stop and take a look at what they've done, and do some self-examination. But I don't think they will. I really don't. Their hatred for Donald Trump is so high, and so biased, and so all-encompassing. They don't know how to act other than to do everything they can to try and destroy him. And I wrote a piece which will be out hopefully today or tomorrow about the Nancy Pelosi situation. In there is the quote where she says she's equal to the president. And in the piece, I raised the constitutional question. Yes, she is third in line of succession behind the president. Should something happen to the president or the vice president, she would become president of the United States. However, the Constitution is very clear that the President of the United States is elected by the people to be the President of the United States. The American people do not vote for her to be Speaker of the House. The 435 representatives in the Congress decide. And, by the way, the President of the United States is the Chief Executive Officer of the administration. There is no Chief Executive Officer for the Congress. There are Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader of the Senate, and so she doesn't carry an executive position the way the President did. Number two, the Constitution, Article 2, clearly says that the President is to report to the American people the State of the Union. And in the early founding of the country, it was done written so that it could be published in the various newspapers across the country to communicate to the American people what the president thought the State of the Union really was. Then, with the advent of radio and television, it became less and less written and more oral and visually. But he does have an obligation under the Constitution to report, and it is an extended invitation from the Speaker of the House to the president. However, my research has not found any example in the history of our country that the president has not been invited to come and speak on an appointed date to the Congress. And she actually invited him, but then she decided she was going to disinvite him. So the games that are going on, I want to say they're child's play, and they're acting like children. But the problem is the issues are so serious. You know, I look at what the Democrats are doing, and they did it last year, and they're doing it again. They believe that they have the moral authority to represent all of the people and decide that illegal immigrants are more important than United States citizens. And that's clearly demonstrated by what they're saying. When you want to have open borders, and when you want to get rid of ICE, and you want to get rid of border control, and you want to let anybody come here with no investigation whatsoever, they are clearly in favor of illegal immigration against the citizenship of the United States. The president says we can't do that. And so that's the real issue. The real issue is the desire of the Democrats to pollute the country, to dilute the country, and try and find ways in which to maintain their power.
I couldn't agree more. I would add that the last State of the Union address that the president did was very good for him politically. I mean, even the talking heads at CNN, I think I remember Van Jones, of all people, being like, Donald Trump became president tonight. You remember you had the gentleman from North Korea, who was held up his crutch. I mean, all of these things. And if the State of the Union were allowed to happen, the president would have had angel moms, I'm assuming. You would also have, more than likely, the empty seat of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which is something the left doesn't want. And so I think that's why Nancy Pelosi did what she did. It was just the president would have won even more people if he would have been allowed to speak.
Well, if you look at the most recent, not last Saturday, but the previous week, the presentation from the Oval Office of Donald Trump about the immigration and border, and the Democratic response. Now, I'm trying to be kind here, but I'm also trying to be objective. What amazed me about Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer was, with all the dynamics going on in the Democratic Party, are they trying to tell me that the best they could do was two old white people who can't even talk to represent the Democratic interest of the American people? Now, I grew up and was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and I was a hunter. And each year we had deer season, and we had a huge excess population of deer. And you could see the carcasses all over the highways throughout the year. And the reason was, when a deer would come out at nighttime and walk out on the road and saw the headlights of the car, it would be frozen. It couldn't move because the lights were so mesmerizing. Nancy Pelosi, if you looked at her response, just looked at her visually, she looked like a deer in the headlights. She had no compassion, neither did Chuck Schumer. It looked like the deer in the headlights and the Undertaker. And it was a terrible, terrible position they put themselves in. They tried to anticipate what the president was going to say. All the things that they said had nothing to do with what he said, so they looked like fools again. So I think that Nancy Pelosi saw what happened when the American people got to see the difference between Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck speaking to them on an important issue, giving him the platform of the State of the Union address. You're right. You're absolutely correct that their great concern is that he would continue to bond with the American people. Nancy Pelosi is getting more than 50% disapproval of her position based on Rasmussen polls. But what's more important is the internals, is that while she's got 50% of the people who absolutely don't think she's doing a great job and she's dangerous, another 40% are somewhat dissatisfied with her. So she's getting terrible, terrible numbers. And she's not endearing herself with the American people. And they don't want the president to be able to have the forum. Now, I don't know what's going to happen there, whether the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, isn't going to invite him to speak from the Senate, or will he go to some other venue and give his presentation? I don't know how it's going to work out, but he's not going to give up the opportunity to comply with the second Article 2 about his responsibility to talk to the people about the State of the Union.
Yeah, he clearly has to do it. Did you see the media coverage, Dan Perkins, of the difference in when Nancy Pelosi uninvited President Trump? You had reporters from CNN, celebrating it. What a beat down. She's really, really giving it to the president. And then when the president grounded her plane, they were all like, "Oh, Donald Trump, he took the low road." And I just thought to myself, man, these are the same. There was one screenshot that I saw on Twitter of the same CNN reporter reporting radically differently based on Nancy doing what she did and the president doing what he did. And I thought, wow, if anything here, I think there may be opportunities for people realizing just how, when the president says the fake news is the enemy of the American people. I mean, we're really figuring that out. I think there's a lot of new people who are coming, who are kind of waking up, being like, "Oh, wow, there's something not right about this."
Yeah, whether you saw Chris Matthews from MSNBC, formerly with the San Francisco Chronicle, been on television a long time. His reaction to the president's withdrawal of the aircraft, his comment was, I thought was quite surprising. He said, "The president embarrassed the Democratic Party. Embarrassed the Democratic Party by taking away her airplane." So, but it's also an example of why she's not equal to the president, because the president can decide whether or not she's going to fly on a military aircraft or not. She can't, and that's what one of the difference between why he's president and she's not.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that that the Democrats are not winning this battle. They're trying to convince themselves that they are, but the American people see what's going on, and I would say to you, I think that there's going to be another announcement about the wall and what could be done and the shutdown that is going to create a very significant problem for the Democrats.
You think? What do you think that's going to be? You're talking about a national emergency declaration?
No. I'm writing a story about this, so I'll tease you a little bit.
Okay.
After 30 days of furlough, the president of the United States has the power to create a reduction in force.
I have heard about this. Yeah, I heard that. You mean he can just lay off a bunch of people?
Yes.
Wow. Well,
and so
yeah, go ahead. What would that mean?
Well, if there are 800,000 people, and I'm not going to give away the total story, but if there are 800,000 people, I'm going to tell you that in the story that I'm writing, Mr. Trump, because he's a businessman, will look at it the same way that General Motors looks at it when they decided to lay off 17,000 people, including union people. And so I think that there are some things, and if you understand that in the month of December, the United States created 312,000 new jobs. If we have 800,000 people that are out of work who are laid off from the government, the private sector can take some of those, and so the economic impact of those jobs being lost and not being replaced and government downsized will actually be a positive thing as opposed to a negative.
Wow. That would certainly be historic. There's no question about that. Hey, Dan,
Yep.
where can people go to find that article that you're writing right now on this subject?
Go to danperkins.guru, Guru, and you can see stuff about my books, radio commentaries like this, and television and international television, and on a list of a bunch of commentaries from about 15 different sources that I write for.
All righty. Dan Perkins, we appreciate it, sir, as always.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Folks, we're going to take a break. Going to reset here. Wouldn't that be incredible? I mean, that would be nuts, but I have heard that. I have heard that theory that after 30 days of a government shutdown, the president now has the ability to actually make mass reductions in the size of the federal workforce, which would be, well, I mean, you can imagine what the media would do if that were the case, but we brought you an article last week talking about how in some instances, not in all, I mean, we've got some problems with terminals and airports and things like that. Agriculture people can't cash their checks, or their checks aren't able to be signed. I was hearing something about that unless the government's open. So there are some issues that are coming down the pike. But in some cases, there are reports that the government is running more efficient than it ever has because you don't have all of these people working against the administration's goals and agenda with the skeleton crew that's still there. Anyway, all that remains to be seen. We're going to take a break. Back in a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Basically told Arkansas, look, you will terminate the contract because it lasted way too long, in my opinion, considering everything we knew about that organization.
Yeah, I think I think as Matt said, sometimes the citizens have to act. And, if you wait on the Attorney General, if she's got a job to do, then Attorney General needs to do the job. Preferred family, they want to talk in this motion to dismiss about how they're victims. They're victims of alternative opportunities. This other group that they merged with and how they deceived them. Well, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it that preferred family is a victim here. But we shall see.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I said a second ago, I mentioned the political optics if the president would have been allowed to give the State of the Union address in the House of Representatives with the angel moms, meaning victims of illegal immigration, and then you'd have an empty seat, an empty Ruth Bader Ginsburg seat likely, because even if she is well enough to attend, she's not, even if she is well, she's not well enough to attend. You know what I mean? She was falling asleep when she was healthy. You know what I mean? Well, Fox and Friends yesterday, during one of their broadcasts, they accidentally threw this graphic up on the screen for a couple of seconds. Zoom in here. They threw this graphic up. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 1933 to 2019. So they put her obituary up, basically, a graphic that somebody has made, and it went live on TV, and Fox and Friends then had to apologize for it. Okay? Now, this is fueling conspiracy theories online that already think that she's dead. They already think that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away, and that somebody's not, somebody's not revealing it because they just don't want the president. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, eventually you would think that people are going to find out about it. But because this graphic went out yesterday, people are now saying, "See, I told you she's already dead, and they're not telling us." I don't know. I mean, I don't believe that, but I'm just letting you know what the other people out there are saying. I will say this. I will say this though. I would like for somebody to get proof of life at this point. I mean, if that actually, I would like for somebody to like knock on her door, or somebody, hey, can we get a photo of her? Or can we get a can we get a look at a heart monitor, maybe somewhere? That's Is that not strange? I mean, Fox News accidentally putting that graphic up is really weird. Anyway, we've got one more hour coming your way. Next, I want you to stay tuned because we're going to have Mr. Josh Waters on. We're going to go over the Conduit for Action scorecard, which bills that they're scoring for this week in the 92nd General Assembly. The bottom of the next hour, State Representative Stephen Meeks on his bill to regulate private companies' microchipping of employees. We'll talk about that, much, much more. Don't go anywhere.
Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Well, yeah, they merged with Alternative Opportunities and then they changed the name to Preferred Family Healthcare, right? Or, I mean, that name, Alternative Opportunities, went away, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, Paul, I think you're right, and I think it's and I understand it's hard for people to think of a corporation as legally liable, but we've given corporations all these rights as entities. And I don't think you can say, well, we changed the head, so even though we're the same entity, we have no liability. We've gotten rid of all these bad actors who are acting in our name. Therefore, we've changed. Therefore, we're free of liability. We collected the money as an entity. We used the money as an entity. We authorized, as a board, this spending to these people, paying them these salaries, these exorbitant salaries for a nonprofit. But hey, we were victims as an entity, and that's. I think you saw that with the Wall Street bailout.
Mm-hmm.
The large banks, they say, well, this guy did the bad thing, but not us as the entity. You get to keep on going.
I like that analogy. I like it. It is like a big bank analogy. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I want to remind everybody listening. So, Milton Rusty Russell Cranford, he's at the center of this. He's the lobbyist. He's at the center of all of this stuff, whether it's, connected to Preferred Family Health Care or John Woods and everything else. And it goes really, really deep. But, he pled guilty. And so when he pleads guilty, he says that he bribed what is believed to be Jeremy Hutchinson, or that Preferred Family Health Care, bribed, and you went through the little loophole of attorney fees because he was a state senator and he's also an attorney, $500,000. Okay, so this is why it is a big deal, and so I wanted to have you guys on. I wanted to be clear here. We're talking about taxpayer money, and it's being given, it's being laundered through, from the taxpayer, from the state to Preferred Family, then for Preferred Family sending it back to a legislator's way to continue to get funding, to get resolutions passed honoring the CEOs of Preferred Family Healthcare or the COOs. I mean, it just is absolutely ridiculous. And somebody, I mean, I know we have people going to jail, but I think you guys are doing the right thing here, representing Mr. Parsons, trying to pursue this. And not only is it a good thing you're pursuing it, but I think just the whole process will educate more people about, how bad it really was and is right now.
Well, we've got to continue to shine a very bright light on public corruption, and whether it's a scheme of this attorney-client privilege, or this attorney-client scheme of, pumping money in and giving money back to an attorney because they're the lawyer. Similar type features in Ecclesia, in the Ecclesia College case, where you've got a legislator, Bob Ballinger, who is giving public money to this private college in Northwest Arkansas. At the same time, his law firm is representing Ecclesia College. It just doesn't smell right. The the appearance of impropriety at a very minimum is there. And we as citizens must continue to shine the light and hold government accountable, or they're going to run amok. I mean, we've seen it in Arkansas, just not enough accountability. And I think that's one of the things that Matt and I are trying to accomplish as an indirect byproduct of this lawsuit is continue to expose these schemes that are just not appropriate.
We're talking with Fort Smith attorneys Joey McCutcheon and Matt Bishop. They're representing, again, Jim Parsons in an illegal exaction case against Preferred Family Healthcare, this giant healthcare company. Joey, I'd like for you to address where we are right now with the other lawsuit I know you're involved in with Ecclesia, attempting to figure out exactly, all of that money, $700,000+ I think, taxpayer money, GIF money went to this college, and we don't really know exactly how it was spent. I mean, I know people have told, or they've told us, but I mean, we'd like to see the documents, right? And Ecclesia says, well, no, we're a private college. We don't have to give you the documents.
That's right.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is hour number 2, and you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine here. I want to welcome to the program with Political Strategies. We have Mr. Josh Waters is with us. And Josh, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, Paul, I'm doing pretty good. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's talk a little bit about the Conduit for Action scorecard. I know that the first score, the first set of bills are out, the ones that CFA supports or opposes concerning what's going on with the 92nd General Assembly. Before we get to those, can we just talk about the purpose of this whole process and what it eventually leads to?
Yeah, so, Conduit for Action last session put out these weekly scorecards, tracking the bills, letting the public know, hey, these are the bills that are affecting your economic freedom in Arkansas. And then at the end of the session, Conduit for Commerce looked at those and chose, which ones they wanted to score in the final legislative scorecard that was issued ranking the legislators. So this will be used as a tool, these weekly scorecards, that Conduit for Commerce may use on scoring all these bills. But, basically what it is, Paul, is it's the economic freedom filter applied to the bills that are filed in the General Assembly this session.
And, of course, economic freedom filter, does it grow government, does it increase dependency on government, does it spend money we do not have? Correct.
Right. And also, part of this is, that economic freedom filter, but also CFA will be scoring bills that are, lead to more transparency and more open and honest government, protecting free speech. Because if you don't have a transparent, open, and honest government, then it almost doesn't matter where we go from there, right?
Yeah.
And I know you've been talking about that. We can just have honest government first and then debate these policy issues. You got to have them kind of going together.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get into it then. I mean, I know everyone, wants to know, so let's go ahead and do the first three. These are three bills that Conduit for Action is scoring that Conduit for Action supports. Let's talk about SJR 2.
Yeah, so SJR 2 is a proposed constitutional amendment. So in each legislative session, that General Assembly will be able to refer out up to 3 proposed constitutional amendments. And in this one, this bill would actually work to end the idea and doctrine of sovereign immunity. And so if people think back to last year, there was a case that held that in Arkansas, under the Arkansas Constitution, Arkansas could not be a defendant in any of her courts, meaning the state, if they are ever sued, if a state agency or state actor is sued, they could claim sovereign immunity and try to get that lawsuit wiped out, effectively, getting rid of any potential lawsuit. And so I think a big area where this could come in, Paul, is the idea of an illegal exaction lawsuit. An illegal exaction lawsuit against the state is saying, hey, you illegally spent that money. And I know you had Joe McCutcheon and Matt Bishop on yesterday, and they filed some illegal exaction lawsuits. But the threat of a lawsuit is a huge incentive for the state to handle our money wisely, to stay within the confines of the Constitution, and to treat people fairly, regardless of any immutable characteristics. So absent some type of constitutional amendment like this, the defense of sovereign immunity can and probably will be brought up by state actors anytime there's a lawsuit filed. And so I think this is a really good first step. It would basically say, hey, unless otherwise provided under the law, we have sovereign immunity. And so there are specific instances like an illegal exaction lawsuit or other causes of action that have been granted to the people under state statute. And those would be allowed to be enforced rather than the state coming in and saying, no, the Constitution says you cannot sue us. So it's really a great protection for the people and a huge incentive for the state to basically do the right thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That was a very shocking decision. A lot of people were shell-shocked when basically they said the king can do no wrong. You can't sue because the government's the king, and that's not an environment at all that is going to lend itself to transparency. And you were right, Josh. The pressure, the possibility out there is a good thing. It's a deterrent. The possibility of a lawsuit, the possibility of being held accountable if you're the government doing something wrong to the people is, we have to have that out there. To not have that out there is just, it's going to make things even more corrupt. Let's go to the second bill this week of support. That'd be SB 118, Senate Bill 118, Protecting Free Speech on College Campuses. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so, I thought this was a really great bill. Basically what it comes down to is there is an attack, especially, it seems like, on conservative speakers and conservative messages on college campuses. So what this bill would do, Paul, is first it would, this idea of free speech zones. So these college campuses want to place people into zones. They want people to get prior permission to be there. And they kind of want to know what you're going to be talking about and get a permit ahead of time. So this bill really addresses the idea of, okay, a free speech zone is really trying to restrict my free speech and put it in certain confines. So it's going to try to say, okay, you can't have these free speech zones. It would also make sure that the campuses aren't suppressing any free speech, including ideas they might find. There's a long list, but some of them are if something's offensive, if something is jarring, if something is conservative, if something is liberal or otherwise objectionable. It says, the campus can't prohibit that speech. And so we all know we have a First Amendment right to free speech on college campuses. But this really goes even further and says we're going to protect that right, and these policies that these schools, they try to make up to get around that, aren't going to be allowed. One other thing, Paul, it does that I think pretty good is, I think a lot of people have heard about Ben Shapiro and some other conservative speakers. When they go to campus, the left tries to shout them down, right? They try to silence them through intimidation, through shouting them down. And so what a lot of these college campuses are doing is they're either A, making them pay huge, exorbitant security fees in anticipation of the left showing up and possibly becoming violent, and or they just shut down the events because they say, well, it's a security risk. And so it's putting into law, hey, you can't just use that as an out, basically. You can't just shut down these speakers because you don't like what they're going to possibly be talking about, and use this idea of a security fee as a reason to try to shut down free speech in which they don't like.
Yeah, that's a really good addition, and that's tempting to be left of bang, because that's where they're going to go next, to say, well, you're making things unsafe and that sort of thing. Kind of going to go Nancy Pelosi on them with the State of the Union address. Next up, SB 52, Mr. Josh Waters. No pensions for criminal government employees. This is another support. Go ahead. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, I know Senator Mark Johnson was on the show talking about this bill, and I hope everyone votes for this. I think it's a pretty clear idea that says, hey, if you're a public official, elected official, or public employee, and through your job as a public official, you take a bribe or you engage in some other corruptive behavior that's a felony and you're convicted, you don't get all of your pension. You don't get your retirement benefit. And I think he spoke to a lot of clients out there. But, for example, State Senator John Woods is in prison for 18 years on corruption charges. As it stands today, he could probably come back and get any retirement benefits. And so I think this is a really good bill. It's an even stronger incentive for an open and honest government, saying, hey, not only are you going to go to prison for 18 years, any money you're expecting in retirement benefits may not be there when you get back.
Yeah, I think that's common sense. And it's a pretty big deterrent because, government pensions are nice things to have. Okay, so to recap, those are the three bills out this week on the scorecard that Conduit for Action supports, based on, again, the principles of does it grow government, does it increase dependency on government, or spend money we don't have. These are clearly all three really good bills. Let's go over to the opposed column. I think we've got two bills here to talk about, Josh. Let's start with HB 1060, adding continuing education requirements for HVAC licensees.
Yeah, so a straightforward bill, a short bill, and I'm pretty sure either the same or very similar to the bill Jeremy Hutchinson filed last session. So basically what this would do is it would add a continuing education requirement for people with heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration licenses. And so this is just one of those, I think, fundamental principles of being someone who's for limited government and someone who supports the free market. They wouldn't vote for this bill, Paul. And that's because this continuing education requirement it's a new regulation. And there may be some people in the field who even like, yeah, I think this is a good idea. But, Paul, that might actually be used as a sword to go against their competition. Say, hey, you didn't get your continuing education requirement. You don't even get a license anymore. This bill would require licensees to submit on their license renewal this continuing education requirement and show where they did it. So it's going to increase time for them to comply. It's going to increase costs. And as we know, those costs are always in some way passed on to the consumer, either through higher prices or less quality services. So this bill absolutely reduces economic freedom. It leans on government intervention instead of allowing the free market to operate.
Yeah, and I know I've talked to some people in the HVAC business, and they like this idea, some of them. I know the last person to unsuccessfully run a bill similar to this was Senator Jeremy Hutchinson. Is that right?
Yeah, he last session, bill almost exactly like this. It's not exact same language. Was filed and it did not pass. So I think it would be a very easy vote for a supermajority of Republicans to say, no, hey, the Republican Party platform says we're for limited government. We support free markets. This bill doesn't do that. It's trying the government to come in.
Who's sponsoring this bill now?
So the sponsor of this bill is Representative Roger Lynch. He's a Republican from Lone Oak.
And what does he do for a living?
Oh, yes, that was something I didn't know this, Paul. When you go into the state legislative website, it has the employment section for the legislators, and under his employment section it says self-employed heating and air conditioning.
Okay.
And so he's right in this field, it looks like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would assume then that he's going to, the reason he thinks this is necessary is for the public's safety. And the question is that true? I mean, the question is that what is everyone else going to think? Well, we need these more regulations because of the public safety. It kind of goes to what we've talked about a long time here. So often these regulations are not about the public safety. They're about making it harder for other people to get into the business in the first place. And that's just not good. And it goes, like you said, Josh, it goes back to the free market. Moving on to the next item, the last item, HB 1002, the new internet sales tax. Conduit Fraction opposes this. Talk a little bit about this. We've going to rehash some arguments from 2 years ago, I'm sure.
Yep, the internet sales tax bill is back. This is a standalone bill that was filed, I think, the first or second day of pre-filing by State Representative Dan Douglas. And it tracks along with Senate Bill 140 of 2017. Now, last session, Paul, a big argument was the fact that even the idea of an internet sales tax was clearly unconstitutional. Since then, the U.S. Supreme Court said, well, under certain conditions, if it's not, too much of an undue burden, and you structure it the right way, maybe you can have it. But even then, Paul, this is an optional tax increase. Just because the Supreme Court says you can do something, like with the Medicaid expansion program, doesn't mean you have to go out and raise taxes. There's a long article in the newspaper this morning, and it was really striking because they're talking about a lot of different tax reform proposals that may come up this session. And by the end of it, Paul, I was thinking some of the legislators were suffering from tax identity disorder. They couldn't tell the difference between what a tax increase was or a tax cut was, and in some cases they were interpreting what they thought a tax increase was to be a tax cut. It was just kind of mind-blowing. So to put any, confusion out there, the internet sales tax is a tax increase on the people, not on out-of-state sellers. The people pay it, and it will grow government at all levels, the state, county, and city level. That's what the internet sales tax does. It says, hey, we're sucking more people out of the pockets of Arkansans, and we're putting it into government coffers. And then, the legislators and the people will have to decide if they want to do that. I don't know, maybe outside of Dan Douglas, many people who ran on saying, yes, let's do that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, who out there ran on passing an internet sales tax? Maybe some, but not a lot. And, Dan Douglas doesn't exactly have a mandate either. He got by his primary by, what, 1 vote? Something like that?
Yeah. I think it was 12. But
12 votes? Oh, okay.
I mean,
yeah,
that's about as close as it can get.
What a huge mandate to go ahead and continue passing the internet sales tax. And you're right, Josh. This is a tax that, this is going to increase the authority of the state of Arkansas to outside the state of Arkansas. I mean, that's the strange part. But when you say it's a tax on the people, what you're meaning is those businesses outside of the state are going to pass on that tax to us. They're just going to raise their prices. And so we're going to have less money.
Well, it's actually not even so much that fault. It's a sales tax. It's a direct tax paid by the people. So whatever the percentage is for their, between their state, county, and city.
So you're saying you're saying that this particular bill is not a tax on out-of-state sellers. It is an actual sales tax that is going to get added to our purchase at checkout on the internet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And they try to say, well, it's a tax on out-of-state sellers because they're the ones collecting and remitting. But that's just not the case. The people of Arkansas pay the tax. It's just collected and remitted on the company where the purchase is made. And so it's an increased compliance cost for them, but the people of Arkansas pay that sales tax.
Wow. Well, and you know what? That's going to be the key, is to get that information out there. I did see in the Gazette this morning they were saying that the internet sales tax may be packaged with and combined with the income tax reductions, which means you're going to put your legislators between a rock and a hard place, which is, are you going to vote against income tax reduction because you don't support the internet tax? Or are you going to vote, for the internet tax, but you also vote for income tax reduction? Even though, the bottom line is this: if you give the government more avenues, more tributaries to fund itself, it continues to grow. The only way to stop government from growth is to limit how they get their money. Period.
Yeah, at the end of the day, is government getting more or less money because they passed a bill? That's how a tax increase is defined.
Yeah.
Whether it's referred out, whether it's mixed in with some tax cuts. At the end of the day, you put it all together, and there's going to be less money in people's pockets and more going to the government because of a change in law.
Yeah.
Then that's a tax increase.
I would feel better, and maybe I wouldn't, but it would be nice with all of this said and done, that we have a commitment from the people in power that there will not be a net tax increase. I get opposing the internet sales tax. I'm opposed to it too. But what I mean is, when it's all said and done, when all the chips, when you've done whatever tax reform you're going to do, you've tweaked this, you've raised that, it would be nice if we could get somebody on record to say there will not be a net tax increase on the people. That when it's all said and done, we will be either paying the same or less, hopefully significantly less. I would really like that. I think what I saw in the Gazette this morning were people saying, well, I would vote for the internet sales tax and income tax reduction because it would be a net tax decrease with just those two. But that's just those two issues. That's not taking into consideration the totality of what's it going to be in April. When everything's said and done in April, what we're going to add up the math and what's the math going to look like. And I really think, just for the sake of unity, people should just own whatever it is they do, and let's just stop with the well, if you look at it this way, technically, the numbers shouldn't lie, and we don't need to be reaching backwards, we don't need to be legislatively plagiarizing and reaching backwards to what's already been done, which I think is what they may do when it comes to their numbers. But Josh Waters, I'll give you the last word, sir, and we got to go.
Yeah, I just encourage people to, continue to check out conduitforaction.org. And they can text the word JOIN to 501-292-2683, and they'll get a text with this weekly scorecard every week. So.
All right. Fantastic. Josh Waters, we appreciate it, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, got to take a break. Back in a minute.
Still haven't gotten the documents that we're seeking. Matt, you may want to speak to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we are getting, you kind of get it in drips and drabs, and at the last hearing I noticed the counsel for Ecclesia stood up and said, well, we feel like we've produced all the documents, this case should go away. And the judge responded, they filed the FOI 2 years ago. Why? That's not a defense that 2 years later you give out some documents and declare it done. And I think that's kind of what Joey's been dealing with. You see this, I know he handles a lot of FOIA cases, and you see that a lot in FOIA cases. Well, now we've done it. Everything's okay. Yes, but we had to file suit to get you to act the right way, and you still haven't completed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Paul, it really speaks to the bigger problem that I hope is going to maybe get some resolution in this legislative session, where legislators don't try to dismantle FOIA, but in fact they put teeth in FOIA as a law. We're just seeing this more.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey, we are back. For those of you that don't know, we were referencing, towards the end of that interview, we were referencing this Michael Wickline piece this morning, No Tax Increase Pledge Hits State Highway Bump. In it, they already... they talked about the highway tax and whether or not it's a tax increase if you refer it to the people. Of course, I don't see how you can say you don't support the tax increase if you're voting for the possibility of there being a tax increase. Some people said that it's not that's technically not a tax increase. But then they mentioned the internet sales tax towards the end, and you have some people saying that, listen, it's about Main Street fairness, and bringing up. If you're a small business owner and the internet has hurt your business, I feel you. I know that's gotta be rough, but hopefully, you wouldn't buy into the idea that passing an internet sales tax is going to somehow make people shop on the internet less. I don't see how that's even possible. I mean, it's just too convenient. So, folks, we also need to realize what we're battling, generally speaking, out there, which is socialism. And we have millennials out there like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has said that it is now immoral to allow billionaires to exist. Quote, I don't think that necessarily means that all billionaires are immoral. Ocasio-Cortez, it's immoral that our system allows billionaires to exist. Fantastic. She also said that the earth only has about 12 years. Ocasio-Cortez, millennials, quote, we're like the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. You know what's funny is about 12 years ago, I had friends that were saying the same thing, that in 10 years, the polar ice caps were going to be gone. I'm not kidding you. 10 years ago, I had friends of mine that were saying the same thing about climate change and global warming. And it's like, somewhere I've got either in Google or Microsoft, I have a reminder that is set to come up to remind my friend what he told me, that because I just thought it was preposterous even back then. At some point, I'm going to get a digital reminder from one platform or another saying, hey, this is when your friend said X, Y, and Z.
More often, as Matt has alluded to, where basically these public entities do not give records. I have to file a lawsuit. Some other lawyer has to file a FOIA lawsuit to get the records, and then within days they're producing the records. There needs to be teeth in FOIA. There needs to be stiff civil penalties. Maybe even the criminal penalties should be utilized. Prosecutors across this state need to start punishing these record withholders in a criminal context and get their attention. Because, if you just produce the records after a lawsuit failed and you have to pay some cost or some attorney fees, that's just it's just like thumbing your nose at the public.
I think that would be good to increase the penalties if you don't comply with FOIA. I do think we have to be very, vigilant is what I'm trying to say, and watch out for a potential repeat of them trying to dismantle the FOIA law, because we are seeing some repeat things that failed last time, right? The internet sales tax failed, and, they're going to bring that back. They're going to bring some of these things back that have already been, voted down 2 years ago. And so, do you think that, are you hearing anything, Joey or Matt? Are they going to attempt to dismantle the FOIA law again, or do you think that's kind of dead?
Well, I think we need to be very vigilant. I think that we will see attempts. Senate Bill 373 was this bill where they tried to create basically an attorney-client privilege. You CC your lawyer on these documents, and all of a sudden those records cannot be gotten by the public. I think we'll see that. I think we'll see that again, and the reason I say that is in the FOIA task force meeting, they never said that they weren't going to attempt to bring that monster up again, and that would have taken us, in my opinion, from the strongest FOIA law in the country to maybe one of the weakest, and we just have to keep our eyes open. I think the FOIA task force, I'm against task force because I think that sometimes they're counterproductive, but I think the FOIA task force, the job that they've done going through all of these bills in the last session, which would have dismantled FOIA, did a great job, and basically said, these bills are not in the interest.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, I got a story here over at conduitnews.com. We covered it briefly yesterday. Welcome back to the program, by the way. Headline, State Rep files legislation to manage microchipping. Pretty interesting stuff here. A lot of people have talked about this for a while. The representative is State Representative Stephen Meeks. He's from District 67. Stephen, welcome back to the program, sir.
Good morning.
Tell us about it. It's House Bill 1177. What made you want to do this?
Sure. First off, I appreciate you having me on this morning because you can imagine I've received a lot of emails and calls about this over the weekend, and people are wanting to know why I'm trying to bring microchipping to Arkansas. One lady called and read me the Riot Act. She said that she wasn't cattle or livestock and didn't know why I'm trying to microchip people. And so I'm glad we're having this discussion.
Hang on a second. So people have read the headlines and they think that you're in favor of microchipping?
Yes.
Wild.
And yeah, and I've had people say, "Well, I'm not getting microchipped. We need to microchip all the politicians first, since they're the ones trying to push this." And people they hear a news story, they jump to conclusions, they have their own presuppositions, and they're off to the races without even reading the bill or getting all the background. So I appreciate you, like I said, having me on so we can delve into this a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, you have companies, and this is happening over in Europe. I think it's more frequently.
Right.
Companies are mandating that their employees be microchipped.
Right. So my interest in this is I chair the technology committee in the House, and so I am constantly reading technology news, looking for opportunities of how we can get ahead of the technology instead of always reacting to the technology. And about a year ago, I came across an article where thousands of people over in Sweden were getting these microchips. And it's something, we've always talked about, hey, we know this is coming, it's going to be somewhere in the future, but now it's starting to happen. And the way they're being used is instead of having a swipe card to get into a building or to access your computer, they insert these little microchips. And if you've not seen them, you can Google it, but they're about the size of a grain of sand, and it goes in the little webbing between your thumb and your first finger. And instead of having the swipe card, you just, swipe this little microchip, and it gives you access to the building, or even vending machines. And there's even some public transits now over in Sweden that you gain access by, getting one of these little microchips inserted. So you don't need your wallet or cash or tokens or, whatever you use for public transportation. You just use this. And then about, I guess back in the summer, I read an article where a firm up in Wisconsin had started doing this for their employees. And so I went to our staff and asked them to research, hey, is anybody doing anything to either look at this or to regulate this? Because, could an employer force an employee to accept one of these chips? What kind of data is being stored on it? What happens when the employee leaves? What happens if and nobody was doing anything? And so that was what prompted me to file the legislation. And essentially, in a nutshell, this is an employee protection bill. And it's also to get the conversation about where we as a state want to see this technology go, or even if we want this technology to come to the state of Arkansas. So what the bill does is there's actually 4 prongs. The first thing it does is it says that a company cannot force an employee to receive a microchip. An employee can reject it for any reason, whether it's privacy, religion, so on and so forth. So you reject it for any reason. If the employee decides that they do want to take the microchip, they actually have to sign an affidavit that says that they agree to this. And that affidavit should include what data is going to be kept on the chip. Usually it's just a number, but what data is going to be kept on the chip and what that data is going to be used for. And so when the employee signs off on that, they know what's going on and how the information is going to be used. And then on the flip side, it also creates a protection for the company because the company has that permission from the employee to proceed. If the employee wants the chip removed under the legislation, they can have it removed at any time for any reason, and it has to be removed within 30 days. When the employee leaves, again, either the employer has to remove it, or if the employee says, you know what, it's there, it's not causing a problem, I don't want to have someone yank it out, the employee can sign an affidavit and simply say, I waive the company of responsibility, and then at that point the employee takes the responsibility going forward. Just because I wouldn't think it'd be right for 20 years from now an employee to come back to a company and say, hey, you put this in me 20 years ago, now you need to pay to take it out.
Yeah.
And so that in a nutshell is what it does. It's a very basic legislation that lays the foundation just to have at least some ground rules. Because let's say, I mean, this technology could come to Arkansas next week, or it could be, it could be 5 years from now. There's no telling on that. And I expect it's not going to be the large corporations. It's probably going to be like this firm in Wisconsin. It's a technology firm. They like to be on the cutting edge. They maybe have 50, 100, 120 employees, and this is something they want to try. And I suspect that's probably where it will start. And, you could easily see a situation where we start out voluntary, but we get, say, 95 out of 100 employees who have the chip, and you just have those 4 or 5 stragglers that are left that the company now has to make special, rules and exemptions or whatnot just to have the old swipe cards or the old passwords, and it becomes more and more cumbersome for the company. So they maybe start saying, hey, you guys need to do this. Just, you guys need to get on board with the program. And this bill is to prevent anything like that from happening.
It's wild stuff. We're talking with State Representative Stephen Meeks. He's a state rep from District 67. He's got this bill, if you're just joining us, to manage the concept of microchipping employees. Now, let me just play devil's advocate here. So you're an employee. You're an employer, and you're saying, I want a microchip on my employees, and if you don't like it, you don't have to work here. So you talk a little bit about, there is, in this bill here, you are basically saying that the employer isn't going to have, the right to hire and fire who he wants to, right? Is that a stretch, or?
Essentially, first going into it, this is going to be an employee that you already have, and when you hired that employee, there was no decision about, the employee is not having to decide, do I want to work here based upon am I going to get microchipped or not?
Yeah.
But you're right. Essentially, the company gets it 5 years later down the road, and you're looking to hire a new employee. As it stands right now, they would be able to tell the employee, unless you're willing to be microchipped, you can't come to work here. And under this law, they wouldn't be allowed to do that.
Right. And that
So
that's and that is the give there, and it is a give. But I put
Yeah.
myself.
You're right.
You put yourself in the. I don't want to be forced to be microchipped or be fired.
Right.
Right. But there are all these there are other behaviors that the employer still does have. You have to do this or you are fired. So this is. Talk a little bit about. Where does your end times eschatology philosophy come in here? Because let's just be honest here. A lot of people think in the book of Revelation, the mark of the beast has something to do with, not being able to buy and sell. And people look at these RFID chips being inserted into your skin as being a potential for some sort of one world government, financial system that is very oppressive to people who are Christians. So where does that come in here? If at all.
So I am a fellow believer here, so I do believe that that's coming. Now, this technology here is not Mark of the Beast. If you can imagine, I've gotten a lot of allusions to that as the story has spread. Now, do I believe this is precursor technology to that? Yes, I do. And, if I look into my crystal ball as to where do I think this is going, in the technology circles, there's something called the singularity, and the singularity is considered the time when there's a fusion between humans and computers, or humans and machines. And, Visa came out with a card this year that's one of those wireless contactless cards. So now if you want to buy something at the grocery store, instead of having to swipe your card, or, how many of us use cash anymore, this card, you just take it and you swipe it, or you take your phone and you swipe it. I could really easily see it being the next step. You get one of these microchips inserted, and like I said, they're doing this over in Sweden right now for mass transit, is you walk up to the grocery, you walk up to the machine, and instead of handing cash or card, you just swipe your hand over this reader, and with the technology, you buy your groceries. So, and there are a lot of advantages to this. You don't have to worry about it being lost and stolen. You don't have to worry about it get it at home. You don't have to worry about someone stealing your PIN number, or stealing the microchip out of your hand. So there's a lot of safety, security, and conveniences that go along with it. And I could foresee a time, and who knows whether it's 20, 25, 30 years down the road, where the majority of people have these in their hand, and now all of a sudden it becomes more expensive for Visa to produce those little pieces of plastic that we now run around with.
Yeah.
And so you're left with, well, either you come along with this microchipping technology or, some version of it, or else you don't have access to these financial utilities tools anymore.
Yeah.
All of us can remember, was it 20 years ago? I remember there was a commercial on AT&T said that, hey, in the future you're going to be able to pick which movies you want, when you want to watch, and you can watch them online. Well, at that time it seemed so fanciful and far-fetched. Well, I bet by the end of the day most of us are going to go on, some sort of streaming service and watch on-demand movies, things that were, science fiction just 20 years ago.
Yeah, and when it happened, when that particular transition happened, it was almost overnight. It was crazy how it went from, on demand just took off like crazy. Well, I'll tell you this. We're talking again with State Representative Stephen Meeks. I kind of foresee a future where you're going to have more and more people start to reject technology and be looked at kind of the way the Amish are looked at now.
Sure.
And the only reason I say that is, I look at my cell phone, and my cell phone's great. I can contact the people I want to contact, but I also know that this cell phone and this constant communication is changing the way I interact with people.
Sure.
It changes the way you interact with, what you do professionally. It changes the way you interact with your family. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who are around my age who really, they love their phones. They love the level of communication technology that they have, but they do kind of fantasize sometimes about it all going away because they do realize that it has this draw that is just, it's kind of a sociological or human experiment that we really don't really know where things are going to end up. We've got kids that have these screens so young, and they're not going to have any social skills and everything else. And so, as technology progresses, I can see a counterculture that kind of could possibly come out of it where people are actually rejecting technology, and those who reject the technology will actually be looked at negatively by society that is wanting to get to what you mentioned, this singularity and this fusion of biology with technology.
Sure. I don't disagree with that. And one of the other areas that I work on, that I actually did an interim study proposal this last summer on the subject of kids and screens. Is there should we in the state be limiting how much time kids spend in front of a computer at school, especially during their, earlier years? Because you're right, a lot of those questions, they're unknown because we're the first generation to tackle these, and a lot of the decisions that we make will set the precedent for even future generations. So, I think you're exactly right. There's going to be a split off between those who want to continue to push the technology further and those who want to go back to a more simpler way of things.
So we're talking with State Representative Stephen Meeks, his House Bill 1177 to manage the microchipping of Arkansas employees. So what do you think? You got any support for this down there? Are you going to run it anytime soon?
My hope is to try to run it this week. I've not talked to my colleagues a whole lot about it. I essentially just filed it kind of, I don't want to say clandestinely, but I just took it and filed it. And so one or two colleagues I've mentioned it to, they do seem to be supportive of the idea and the fact that we need to try to get ahead of this. And, if nothing else, it at least started a conversation that we as society need to have about where and what the appropriate use of this technology is going to be. And I've even had some people say that the bill doesn't go far enough and that we just need to ban it altogether.
Hey, well, that would, like you said, it is the part of the conversation. I mean, I think it makes a lot of people nervous. I mean, with the amount of, the amount of, like what you're talking about when the information that is recorded with the chip and what you do with that information. I mean, with what we're seeing they're doing with our information now, I mean, good grief. I mean, what does it monitor? Does it monitor your heart rate? Does it monitor your cholesterol? I mean, what is it? What else are these chips going to do?
Right. Yeah, the whole big brother syndrome, and I haven't talked about this a whole lot yet, but I have a companion bill that I'm working on where, a lot of companies, and even the state does this to its state employees, where if you don't smoke, you don't do this or that you get a discount on your health insurance. And some companies now, I've read, are offering these discounts if the employee will wear one of these, Fitbit or health trackers. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that that stays voluntary, that we're not going to have companies that are going to go to the point where they're going to force their employees to wear health monitoring devices all the time that the company has access to in order to receive an employee discount.
So yeah, on that, this is a lot of this is, it's really weird because I'm part of the generation that remembers growing up and watching science fiction movies, and I mean you do too, Stephen. Think that it's far from the future, but it's here now. And what you just mentioned is there's this movie is very similar to this movie with Ewan McGregor, I think Scarlett Johansson, called The Island, where they measure his sodium intake by he went to the bathroom, and so they know his sodium's too high, so he can't have bacon, and he wants bacon, but he can't have bacon, and so is it far off? I don't know, but I do know this: in our own lifetime, the Obama administration and Congress said that you have to have insurance in order to be in good standing with your government, that you have to pay us a fee. And so, and then the Supreme Court said that was legal. So if that's legal, then is it not legal for at some point they mandate you have to have a certain amount of broccoli and you can't have bacon? I mean, and so I mean, it's pretty nuts. I mean, we have the technology to enslave ourselves, and that's what we need to be made aware of. That we need to make sure that we don't allow the technology to enslave us. So
right, exactly, and some people have given me a hard time, but this stuff is not here. Why are we even bothering with it? Well, like you said, it could be here tomorrow, and it'll be here before we know it. And we'd better start having these conversations, or else we're going to reap the freaking cut. I don't want to get a phone call from a constituent next summer after the session's over saying my employer is trying to force me to do something like this that I have a religious objection to.
Yeah,
and it's a lot easier to lay the ground rules first than to come back and try to do fire damage after.
Yeah, that's called being left of bang. You don't want to be right of bang. You want to be left of the issue. Stephen Meeks, I appreciate you coming on the program, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, I'll see you at the Marble Palace. Folks.
Sounds good. You have a good day.
All righty. We got to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in just a moment.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Of the public, and they do nothing for accountability, and we've got to fight against them.
Yeah.
So I think we will see more, Paul. I don't think they ever go away.
Yeah.
You know, it's sad. I mean, we've got a group of Republicans who purport to believe in accountability. Well, let's show it. You know, let's make FOIA stronger. Let's not make FOIA weaker. In my opinion, FOIA should apply, Paul, to state legislators. I think they need to go one more step and say that we're going to make the open meetings provision of FOIA apply to state legislators. Why not? Why should they be able? They can videotape all their committee meetings and on the floors. They can video, but when they do their business in the back rooms of the Capitol, big deal. I mean, so let's make FOIA apply, the open meetings apply to state legislators, and make them do their business in committee rooms where we can watch.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Arkansas legislature, you're going to get the first hit, the Arkansas State Legislators website. This is their joint website where you can look at bills and things like that. They're reconvening today. The Joint Budget Committee will be meeting in the MAC building, room A, at 9 a.m. Then at 10 a.m., you have the City, County, and Local Affairs Committee meeting in the Senate. Again, these are all live streamed. Then at 10 a.m., room 138, the Education Committee in the House. Then the old Supreme Court building at the same time at 10 a.m., you'll have the State Agencies and Government Affairs Committee in the Senate meeting. 10 a.m., room 130, the Public Health, Welfare, and Labor Committee meeting in the House side of things. On the Senate side, room 309 at 10 a.m., the Agricultural, Forestry, and Economic Development Committee will be meeting. And then let's see here, we have the Senate convening at 1 p.m. today, and the House of Representatives at 1:30 scheduled to convene today. And again, they are live streaming all of that. The website is kind of complicated to figure it out, but it can be done. The good news is, yeah, we're going to be watching what they're doing, and if anything happens, we certainly will, get that to you as soon as possible. You want to make sure that you do text that number if you want legislative updates throughout the week, 501-292-2683. Text the word JOIN to 501-292-2683. I'll be broadcasting Thursday morning. I'll be down in Little Rock tomorrow after the broadcast here, but I will be broadcasting from Little Rock on Thursday morning again like I did last week. And so, anyway, we're going to be covering this the best that we can. Let's see, do we have any national? No, basically, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is saying that the world's going to end in 12 years. So maybe you know what? I should have brought that up with State Representative Stephen Meeks. His microchipping bill. Well, Ocasio-Cortez thinks the world's going to end in 12 years because of global warming. So that's a whole thing as well. Anyway, little context there, adding to everything. The Conduit for Action scorecard that we went over at the top of the hour is up at conduitforaction.org. I'm assuming it'll be a cross-post there up at Conduit News as well. If you want to look at the 5 bills, 3 bills to support, 2 bills that are opposed this week, and then, of course, there's going to be more legislation next week. Did you hear this story? Pope Francis knew his protege took nude selfies, abused seminarians, but promoted him to the top Vatican post. According to a report by Breitbart News, the Vatican received information in 2015 and 2017 that an Argentine bishop close to Pope Francis had taken naked selfies, exhibited obscene behavior, and had been accused of misconduct with seminarians, like seminary. His former vicar general told the Associated Press, undermining Vatican claims that allegations of sexual abuse were only made a few months ago. Yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. When's the last time, in my lifetime, and I've said this and I'll keep saying this, and I know there are people out there, who are Catholics, and you're just as disgusted by all this, but something is really wrong here. I mean, when is the last time, in my entire lifetime, anytime the Roman Catholic Church is in the news, we all know what it's for, right? We all know why they're in the news. And that's disturbing, that this is something that's gone on for as long as it has. It's very disturbing. And something's got to be done about it. Something's got to be done about it. It's ridiculous what it apparently looks like. Apparently, in the higher-ups of the Vatican, it is a shelter for some pretty messed up individuals, apparently. Anyway, we're going to end the show, and we're going to see you back here tomorrow at 6:05 a.m., and all of this is available, content at Facebook, YouTube, conduitnews.com. Arkansas, thanks so much for being with us. Be safe.